Well, you could be, if you're a betting person, you might be looking to, or you could be thinking about whether or not this John Collins trade is the end of something or the beginning of something. What I do know is that it's the end of all of the speculation that has run rampant for 3 off seasons now, right?
Yes.
So that has come to an end, at least according to multiple sources, because we know, of course, those deals can't be consummated until July 6th, although negotiations can officially start on Friday for the 100+ free agents in and around the association, right? But John Collins, for all intents and purposes, is no longer a Hawk. He's now a member of the Utah Jazz. They, in effect, send over Rudy Gay and a second-round pick. And what that does essentially is free up the Hawks with about 25.3 mil, depending on whose report you believe, if you will. Right. But most of the reports still hover around that 25 mil point, which basically is something that if they want to, they can utilize it for going out into the market. But that said, is the JC trade really the end of this iteration of the Hawks, at least as currently constructed?
I think so. I wholeheartedly believe so, because here's the thing. You talk about a new coach coming in towards the end of the year. It was kind of like the evaluation period for Quinn Snyder. Like, he want to look at these guys and say, hey, let me see who I can get my hands on. Let me kind of rub on these guys and talk to these guys and see what I can get out of them, squeeze out of them out of the last 20-some games or so to end the season. So I think that, given the scenario, like you mentioned earlier, John Collins being on the trade block for the past 3 off seasons, plus Quinn Snyder saying, you know what? I may or may not, and this wasn't reported, these are just my thoughts and feels. Like, he may be in a situation where, like, well, this dude might not be able to fit into what I'm trying to do going forward. So when you think about the longest tenured Hawk being out the door, and now Trae Young is the longest tenured Hawk on this roster, yeah, I think this is going to be a different iteration. I like the word that you use. It's going to be a different iteration of the Hawks going forward. And on top of that, Landry Fields, that's the first major trade that he's made. Right? And when you think about Travis Slant going out the door and the trades that he was able to make, rebuilding, like literally a whole hard rebuild, for this organization, and getting this team to the point where they can get to the Eastern Conference Finals. So I think this is the beginning of the Landry Fields era. He's talked about how, he's willing to go into the luxury tax because of Tony Wrestler's blessings. He's got that blessing. Now, we kind of it's kind of like wait and see mode now. Okay, what's the next move? Like, what are you going to do in return for that? Because I feel like it's going to be a situation where they're going to probably fill this in-house deal, because who's a guy, take it back to those last 20-some-odd games, who's a guy that I consistently, and we've talked about this as well, that we thought he improved tremendously up under Quinn Snyder, and that's Jalen Johnson. I really feel like Jalen Johnson, if he continues to progress, he might find himself in that starting role. Or another guy who flourished under Quinn Snyder, Saddiq Bey. Those are 2 names that I will keep an eye on for that power forward spot, because those guys like really, really look good up under the Snyder regime and what he was trying to do. So when you think about a new iteration of this team going forward, those are some of the names that you need to get familiar with right now.
Yeah. And it's one of those things to where if they have to kind of piecemeal between the 3 and 4, they can do the piecemeal between the 3 and 4 with a stretch, or you can do it between the 4 and 5 because of the guys you just mentioned. And I'll even throw in AJ Griffin, because he can play multiple positions. So I think because they have that depth sort of in the front court, for lack of a better term, from 3, 4, 5, that kind of gives them the ability to say, hey, if we don't go out and get like this top level A-lister supermax guy to replace John Collins, we may be okay, because the question becomes, where do they think the biggest need truly is? Because at 3, I think they're going to go ahead and stick with DeAndre Hunter and just say, hey, he might not be the greatest, but he's solid. But I think it really also depends on what the market dictates, because if the market is dictating that there is opportunity to go after another 3, if you will, then you'll go after 3 with all guns blazing. But I think we're going to see in the next few days which 3, which 4, which 5, which are really available. I think that's what really is. That's going to be important, like who's actually available. Because remember, the Hawks have been in conversations feels like the all other 29 teams in
Everybody.
the association at some point, right?
Everybody.
Yeah, right. And how long is it taking them to get one partner that they were finally able to consummate a deal with? So to me, that's like a big piece of the puzzle as well. Like, who are you actually going to be able to pull this off with? Granted, got a little more flexibility than you had, but who can that be? Now, the most recent report, probably the one in the last day or so, was with Pascal Siakam. But again, depends on whether or not the Raptors are looking to part ways with him. And I don't know that that is necessarily a foregone conclusion. That said, I think it bears a question of what you just mentioned, which is whether or not you believe which report, whether or not you believe the report that they do want to stay under the luxury tax, and that's what the dictate has been, or that there's openness. Now, here's the thing. According to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, he says the Hawks are expected to continue to be in a deal-making mode this offseason, and ownership has given Landry Fields the okay to move into the luxury tax should it be necessary to improve the roster, sources said. And that was a report from Woj as of yesterday. Now, another report came out just a few days ago, also from ESPN, but this time from Brian Windhorst. He was on the Hoop Collective live draft show last Thursday, and he said Atlanta Hawks ownership has ordered their front office to get below the league's luxury tax line for next season. The Hawks are under a mandate, from what I've been told, this is Brian Windhorst, to get out of the luxury tax. They've spent a lot on signing guys, so they've got to shed some salary. So my question becomes, when you juxtapose these two reports, it really makes you think, okay, which one is the most accurate? Are the Hawks going to be aggressive in free agency and have the ability to kind of move into the luxury tax if they need to? Or is the other report more correct and other moves can be made to attract and retain some solid talent rather, to remain under the cap? Which way we going?
I'm believing Wendy. I'm with Wendy on this one. I know Woj is Woj. Like, Woj bombs are a real thing, and they have been 100% correct. But I think both things can be true, right? You could say, hey, get out of this luxury tax, but there are still some moves to be made to stay under the luxury tax, right? You can move Clint Capela, you can move DeAndre Hunter, and I talked about the in-house replacement that they have in Jalen Johnson and Sadiq Bey at that 4th spot. You got Onyeka Okongwu. This was also part of Woj's report. He said they want to look at extending Sadiq Bey, Onyeka Okongwu, and Jalen Johnson as well. So, like, I'm putting both of them together. I'm saying, like, okay, this makes sense. Like, I feel like they're going to stay under the luxury tax for this year, and they're going to continue to develop Jalen Johnson and AJ Griffin and try to figure out a way to get Sadiq Bey under contract for a long time, for a few more years. Those are some of the things that make sense, right? Because trying to trade for Pascal Siakam I will absolutely love Pascal Siakam to come in. I think that's the type of guy that I feel like that you can bring in to be a contender, be in those conversations. But I don't feel like that's where the Hawks are headed. So I feel like there's a combination of the two. I feel like they're gonna try to get the money right with Onyeka, Sadiq, and Jalen potentially, and they're gonna try to fill in the gaps with whoever is not on this roster come next year, because we know they're under luxury tax now. They're in the clear, but I know there are ways that they can't get even more up under that luxury tax.
Yeah, and I think that's one of those where it's interesting because it's going to be really, really kind of touch and go. Again, it kind of depends on whether or not they're going to be able to get the proper trade partners, because I do believe that they can make some moves. I just think it's all about those trade partners, and it depends on whether some of those teams that are still out there and kind of in, I'll call it pseudo fire sale mode, right? I don't know that these teams are in complete fire sale mode, but as an example, you look at the Blazers, and if the Blazers are in, we'll say, I want to call them pseudo fire sale mode, right? I'm not going to say they're in full fire sale mode, because I do think they're still trying to decide, are they going to try to build around Dame regardless of having drafted Scoot Henderson, or are they just going to blow the thing up and just, start all over, right? So you think about that as an example, and you're looking at it, going back to your point about Clint Capela, and if nothing else, you can get a little bit more out of Yusuf Nurkic for a little less, about $3-4 million less than you get out of Clint Capela for a little bit more production, if you will. So there might be some possibilities there, especially because they have that $25 million exception that they can work with for the next year, as long as they're utilizing it to trade. Now, of course, they can't utilize it to sign their own. So it would not apply to Double O, Jalen, or Sadiq, but it could be utilized for someone on the outside, and that might be what gives the opportunity to do both. It'll be interesting to see, because I trust that both of those sources are probably accurate on some level. So we shall see.